My name is Susan Boyne, and I'm a pilot for United Airlines. And I'm currently flying the Boeing 787, and I do mainly international flights. I'm the oldest of three kids, and I always knew since I was a little girl I wanted to be a pilot. I went through other stages, of course, like, oh, I'm going to be an actress or president of the United States. But the one thing that stayed consistent was I've always wanted to fly airplanes. It was something I always daydreamed about. I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and Burke Lakefront Airport used to have the most amazing air show. We'd go to the Dayton Air Force Museum, and my mother's from Alabama. We'd go to NASA at Redstone Arsenal and tour the museum there, and it was just something that never went away. I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida, and I earned my bachelor's degree in aeronautical science, and I minored in flight safety, which was sort of an aircraft accident investigation minor. At the time when I graduated high school in 1987, being a military pilot wasn't an option for me because I wear glasses. And back then, it was very, very extremely difficult to get a military waiver to be a pilot. And I always knew I wanted to fly commercially. So I didn't do the military route, which some people do, which is also an excellent way to go. Because nobody in my family flew, Embry-Riddle for me was a great experience because it really introduced me to aviation and what was involved and just increased my love for aviation. You do need a bachelor's degree if you want to go the commercial route, which is what I wanted to do. You can get a degree in anything. There's many different ways to become a pilot. I wanted to study my field, aviation, so I was able to do that at Embry-Riddle. There's also flight schools, like there's a place called ATP, Airport Transport Pilot, and you're able to get all your ratings within 6 months to a year. But the important thing is that you need to build your flight experience, and you want to be able to do that and get paid to do it. So when I graduated college, I was a flight instructor, and I worked for an FBO that I was very fortunate also had 135 charter. So I flight instructed, I taught people how to fly, and that was a way to build my time. And we also, because we flew 135 charter, we also had multi-engine airplanes. We had a jet, a Citation II. We had a Conquest II, which is a turboprop, and a Beechcraft Baron, which is a light twin multi-engine airplane. So at the same time, I was also able to build up my multi-time. And then I got hired with Continental Express, and I flew a Beech 1900, which was a turboprop, upgraded to captain at that time in 4 months, and then became a captain on the Embraer 145, which is a small turbojet, and then went to Continental Airlines, and then we merged with United. So now I'm with United Airlines. The airline industry is based on seniority. So it's based on your date of hire. So I've been there 25 years. So I'm fairly senior, so I'm able to hold a great schedule. You get paid what you fly. So you could drop your trips down and have more time off, but you won't make as much money. So this week, I just came back from Frankfurt, Germany. And then later this evening, I fly to Denver, Colorado, where our training center is, because we do a rolling calendar every 9 months. I have to go get requalified in the sim, where they give us a bunch of emergencies and things that you should never see on the line, but you get to see in the simulator, and you hope to never see flying the line. I'll be home on Wednesday, then I'm off until the following Monday, and then I fly to Tokyo. So I work approximately maybe 10 to 12 days out of the month, and I have about anywhere from 18 to 21 days off. A typical flying day is for international flights. We're supposed to show up an hour and a half before departure so we could flight plan. I hate being late, so I always show up 2 hours prior. And we meet as a crew and we discuss the flight plan, the weather, the fuel, our route that we're going to fly. We look at where the turbulence has been reported so we can try to find a smooth ride for our flight attendants and for our passengers. Then we get into the aircraft, we do our pre-flight check, and then once all the passengers or bags are loaded, we push back, we taxi out for takeoff, and most pilots, tend to hand fly it up to altitude. We don't just leave it on autopilot like I think the general public thinks we do. Because I'm Fly International, there's 3 pilots. So we get a crew break and we have a bunk room and I actually do sleep on the airplane when I'm in the bunk room. And then when we come in for landing, we brief the type of approach and arrival that we're doing. And we come in for landing, clear customs, and go to our hotel room. And depending on the time of day, like in Europe, you tend to land in the morning. I'll sleep for maybe 3 to 4 hours, but no more than 4 because you won't sleep that night. And depending on the weather and the crew, and if I've been to the city before, I'll either work out or go sightseeing. I then meet the crew for an early dinner, and then we're usually back in our room by 9 or 10 to get a good night's sleep to fly back to the States the next day. In the spring, I was fortunate enough to have a 5-day layover in Rome. So I and the other pilots, we took the high-speed train down to Naples and we went to Pompeii, and they just, because of the pandemic, they just had reopened and we were all of 12 people in Pompeii, which was amazing because normally it's always crowded and with tourists. Not only did we get to see Pompeii and we hiked Mount Vesuvius, on the next day when we got back to Rome, we did a cooking class. So I learned to make homemade pasta and tiramisu. So that was definitely one of my favorite trips. I actually really, even after all this time, I still love my job. I still love flying airplanes. My favorite part is takeoff and landing. It's just fun. On the 737, we have what's called the River Visual 19 into Washington Reagan Airport, and that was always challenging and a fun arrival to do. Managing your rest schedule, especially with international, because I'll fly to Tokyo and I'll be there for 48 hours, and then I'm off until the following Monday, and then I fly to Milan, which is on the other side. So managing my sleep has been the most challenging, especially as I get older. So what I could tolerate in my 20s is definitely different than what I tolerate in my 50s. So I'm very protective of my sleep. I think perseverance and sticking with it, because everybody, when you first start learning to fly, everybody will hit a plateau where maybe one maneuver is more challenging or you're not getting how to enter a hold when you're on instrument flying. But if you just stick with it and persevere, it will all come together. Don't give up on it either, too, because I think some people might be dissuaded because they see on the news, this airline is furloughing pilots, this airline is hiring pilots. But that's not any different than any major corporation merging with another corporation and laying people off. And if it's something you really want to do, then it's worth it. And you spend most of your time at work, you should really honestly love what you do. Some of my friends who are in their 60s, when they first were getting hired at the major airlines, they would be married, but they would lie and say they weren't married because they were afraid the airlines wouldn't want to hire them because they were afraid they would go on the mommy track and not stick with it. I think my peer group were the first to really start having children and making it work. And I think the young women coming behind me, I think it's much easier for them now. If you're interested in becoming a pilot, the first advice I would give you is maybe go to your local airport and do what's called a discovery flight at the flight school. So it's like a 30-minute flight with a flight instructor. And so it just gives you a taste to see if you really like it and want to pursue it. And then there is a magazine called AOPA, It's Aircraft Owner Pilot Association. And if you go to their website, it's called Learn to Fly. It's a good source of information on where to start and the different paths you could take. Because some people go to college, they get their degree in education and then do the Air National Guard, or other people do ROTC, other people do the academies, or other people go to like schools like Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Ohio State University has an aviation program, University of North Dakota, Kent State University, Purdue University. So there's all different sorts of routes. And I've flown with pilots who had a career change in their mid 30s and decided they weren't happy with what they were doing and went to a flight school and got all their ratings, built up their time, and now are working for, a major airline. In high school, you do those tests to see, like, to just help you figure out, like, oh, you might be better geared in a career towards liberal arts or things like that. And, I did band, I did theater, I did choir. And even though I took like AP physics and AP calc and all that, when I took that test, it showed I should pursue a career in liberal arts. And at the time, this is 1987, my guidance counselor said, oh, well, you shouldn't be a pilot. This test shows that you should do liberal arts. And I came home very upset. My father marched in there and said, how dare you? My daughter can be anything she wants to be. And how dare you discourage her? So don't let those tests define what you want to become or who you are. I think the tests are worth taking only to help you spark an interest in maybe something you haven't thought of before. The inspiration was I've always wanted to be part of a book club. But with my schedule, it's been too hard to commit. And with the pandemic and with all of us, being more restricted, some of the international layovers we go to, like in Australia, you're not allowed to leave your hotel room. Tel Aviv, Israel, you're not allowed to leave your hotel room. And so we have a United Airlines female Facebook page. So I reached out and invited people that wanted to join. And so we have about maybe 25 to 30, depending on everybody's flight schedule. So we usually have anywhere from 4 to 10 people once a month on the Zoom call. And I send out a survey and we vote on what book we want to read. And it's just a nice way of building up camaraderie and, feeling together.